Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? I've just been handed an urgent and horrifying news story. And I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
I'm out on the road, up on the roof.
Hey there, everybody. PTPOP here with all four lobes of my brain purely bound behind my back.
Chasing the wind,
And today,
tears flowing, love is something to you.
none of my knobs are working. I can't get my knobs to work. I can't get my knobs to work. So today is Wednesday, November 23rd, 2022. And I'm going to take off the headset because this just doesn't look good on my wonderfully bald head. I want to wish you all a pre-happy Thanksgiving and hope you all have a good holiday. Today is a day that is a beautiful sunny day outside here in Cleveland, Ohio. The sun is shining, the sky is blue, and I am a happy pop. But today, I woke up today in a rare mood, and I was thinking about how today was, it was 20 years ago that I had decided, not this day, but this last spring, it was 20 years ago, I had decided to move to the beautiful state of Phoenix, Arizona. And at the time, I had grown very tired of Cleveland, and I was very depressed here. And I had decided to move to Phoenix because I thought Phoenix was a more beautiful state with more beautiful people and better weather and so on and so forth. And I got this idea in my head because I had a high school buddy of mine move to Phoenix. He had transferred out there with Progressive Insurance. And I visited him twice, and I love Phoenix. I just thought it was the most beautiful place in the world. So that was 1997. Fast forward to spring of 2002. I had been laid off from WorldCom, which at the time was the largest data provider in the world. And I sold my condo, and I moved to Phoenix. And I know I'm leaving out a lot of the details so I don't bore you all to death. And I woke up today thinking about it's been 20 years since I had done this. It's been a long time. And here's a picture of me at, I don't know, I guess that would have been called, I don't know what it was called. It was called Bank One Ballpark in the late 90s. It's a Diamondbacks game. The Arizona Diamondbacks have an indoor stadium. All their stadiums are indoor because they have to, because it's like 118 degrees out there. And check out the Mohawk here. It looks pretty cool. But it was 20 years ago today that I moved to Phoenix. Not today, but as I said, in the spring. But today I woke up thinking about it. It was 20 years ago I moved to Phoenix. And it was a time when I was going through a lot of changes. And I thought that if I moved to Phoenix, that my life would change. And I thought that if I moved to Phoenix, that all the ghosts and the depression in Ohio I'd leave them in Ohio. I'd cut ties and I'd move to Phoenix, and everything would get better, and there'd be sunshine, puppy dogs, and rainbows. And this is also when I first started working in the major, big, giant corporate call centers, because out in Phoenix, there's 10,000 companies in the valley. At least there were 10,000 corporations when I lived out there. I don't know what's out there now. And this is when I first started working in the major, big call centers. And this is where I began to understand my first life lesson, is that once you leave, you can never go back, was the number one lesson. And number two, just because you move to another city doesn't mean life is going to get better. And I'm thinking about this today because while I was eating my breakfast, I was kind of doing a review of my life and thinking over all the things and all the changes I've gone through over 20 years. And I had it in my mind when I moved to Phoenix that it was going to be like this, like just this phenomenal time. I was going to be like having a great time and meeting gorgeous women, because all the women out there just drop dead gorgeous. The men are good looking too, but the women, oh my God, you want to see some nice looking women, go to California or to Phoenix, and you're going to see some drop dead gorgeous women. But I went out there thinking, okay, I'm gonna move out there. I'm gonna get past this whole thing with my childhood, being raised by two alcoholic parents and poverty. I'm gonna get rid of all the paranoia and just these horrible things that haunted me, and I'm gonna start a new life, and it's gonna be great and fun, yada yada yada. So I move out there. My first job in my first major call center was with a company at the time was called Bank One, and when I got to Phoenix, Bank One was just about to merge or change its name to Chase. And the call center I was in Phoenix, near downtown, and it was a massive call center. And my boss was crazy. I mean, my boss was just insane. And she was very like, oh my God, She was like that. I don't know what you call that kind of personality, but she was really like fractured. Her thoughts were real fractured, and she's real frantic. And I remember I was in training for like a long time at this bank for like a month, and in training there was a woman that would come dressed. One of my coworkers that was in training with me was a woman. She was Hawaiian, gorgeous. This is a drop dead gorgeous woman. Just But one day she came into class wearing a long, white, flowing, like prom gown. Whatever, hun. But anyway, my boss was crazy, and when I finally got on the phones, she would actually sit at her desk and listen to my calls. And if I'd said something wrong, she'd break in on the call live. So the customer could hear her, I could hear her. And she'd be like, oh, no, don't say that, Peter. Say this. Oh, no, don't say that. And the customer would be like, who is that? Who's talking now? I'm like, I'm sorry, sir, this is my supervisor. And this is my very first major corporation. Like, this is a huge bank. You know, they're all over the place now. And this is my first experience in a major corporate call center. And I began to see that maybe I had made a mistake. I was living in an apartment complex in Gilbert, Arizona, and I had locked my bike. I had a first floor apartment, and I had a mountain bike, and I locked it up on my patio. And you could easily walk up to my patio and walk away from it. I could walk up, I could take my bike off the patio and go for a ride. Well, I locked the bike up, but I didn't lock up my $100 gel seat. And so one day I came home from work to go for a ride, and my gel seat was gone. And I made this mistake of calling the police about it. Now, if you're not familiar with living in a big city, I wasn't at the time. I grew up in Cleveland, and Cleveland is considered a pretty small city. And I actually grew up in the country. I didn't grow up in Cleveland. I grew up in a small town 35 miles east of downtown Cleveland called Chardon, Ohio, where there were maybe 10,000 people, and they had 2 squad cars, and that was about it, and a fire engine, and that was about it. So I call the Gilbert, Arizona police, and this guy shows up my door wearing, I thought he was like out of the Terminator. He was wearing like a full vest, body armor, guns, grenades, bazookas. He's built like a brick shithouse. This guy had the buzz haircut, the whole thing. And see, I thought this was shocking because I grew up in a town where, my chief of police was this really heavy-set guy, shaped like a pear. He was heavy, probably 200, 300, 400 pounds. The firemen were all volunteer firemen. They were heavy-set guys. They ate cheeseburgers, and they weren't in shape. My police department were like, old, fat, white guys. This guy shows up at the door, built like Arnold Schwarzenegger. He's like, "Oh, Mr. Tompkins, you have had a theft. I understand you've had a theft." I'm like, "Yeah, somebody stole my bicycles eat off of my patio. And he goes, you know what, Mr. Tompkins, where are you from? And I said, I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. He goes, well, I got to give you some advice and give you a little bit of an update. You're no longer in Cleveland. You're now living, this guy began to lecture me. He said, you're now living in the fourth largest city in the nation. And there's 4.5 to 5 million people in this valley down here. And he pointed off to the southwest corner of my complex. He said, you know what's over there? I said, no. And he goes, just beyond those buildings, across Gilbert Road, is something that we like to call Little Mexico. And Little Mexico is a bunch of illegal aliens, illegal immigrants that like to walk through this apartment complex, and anything that's not nailed down, they're going to take. And they're going to sell at the local pawn shop. And I went, oh. You know, I'm standing there in the doorway of my apartment, and this guy's lecturing me about how I'm in a dangerous city now. And I went, and I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, I'm not in Kansas anymore. And it was a very sobering moment because, I had never experienced crime. You know, I know having your bicycle seat isn't exactly a huge crime, but I had never had things stolen from me. And so it was at that moment that I realized I was no longer in Ohio. I was no longer in Kansas. The officer gave me his card. He said, basically, don't call us about stuff like this because we're not going to follow up on it. He walked away, and I closed my door, and I went, wow, I'm not in Kansas anymore. And this is, when you make life-changing decisions like this, it has an effect on you. I wanted it to have a positive effect, but, I grew up where there was no traffic. I grew up where it snowed and there was a change of seasons and the people were friendly and courteous and polite. And I found that Arizona was quite the opposite. My drive to work in Arizona was like this. Now, this is not a traffic jam. This is my commute. Now, this was taken at a different time. This was taken several years later. And this is on, I believe I took this picture on the 10 driving into Phoenix. It's either the 10 or the 101. And we're talking about a commute where it would take me an hour and a half to get to work each way. Sometimes 2 to 3 hours if there was an accident. And here I'm on the passing lane, and the lane to my left is what's called the diamond lane or the HOV lane, the high occupancy vehicle. So if you had 2 or more people in your car, you could drive in the HOV lane. And, I woke up today thinking about this, all the changes that I've been through since I moved to Phoenix. I moved to Phoenix. I started working in call centers. And I realized that that's not exactly the best thing for me. And it starts to dawn on me that I've bitten off more than I can chew and more than I'm willing to swallow. But at the same time, when I had first moved out to Phoenix, I had just met who was the woman who was now my wife. So some good things happened, but my wife was living in Cleveland, and I was living in Phoenix, and we were having this long-distance relationship because we had met just as I sold my condo. So we were having this long-distance relationship. It goes throughout the spring and the summer of 2002 and into the winter. She comes out and visits me. I come home and visit her, and we have this long discussion, and she eventually says, well, I tell you what, why don't you move back to Cleveland, and we'll see how it goes, and, if it works out, we can come back to Phoenix. So it was literally 20 years ago that I was getting into my car. I had put all my furniture into storage. My lease was up in about a month, and I was getting ready to move back to Cleveland to live with the woman who is now my wife. And I remember it was November of 2002. I walked out to my car to leave and drive back to Ohio after living there only a few months. I'd lived there for about 6 months, and I wasn't happy out there. And I knew I wasn't happy out there, but I just didn't know what to do because I'd spent all this money and time and effort to get out there. And I was like, oh, I'll go back to Ohio and live with Meg, who was my wife. And I remember walking out of the parking lot of my apartment, and I looked around and went, I don't think this is for me. I don't know. I just don't think this is for me. But I felt kind of bad because I was leaving it behind me. Like I felt like I had to finish something out there. So I jumped in my car, and I drove out of Phoenix. And to get back to Ohio, the way I drive between Ohio and Phoenix is to go up the 17 north out of Phoenix into Flagstaff. And that night, it started to rain. And I was driving up basically the side of the mountain and pouring down rain, and I couldn't see the road, and I was horrified. Anyway, long story short, I made it back to Ohio. After a few days of driving, got back safely. And, you know, today I woke up thinking about it because this is where my life changed in a major way. There's been several events in my life that have changed my life. The death of my father was a turning point for me and a turning point for him. And the death of my mother was a huge turning point. But moving to Phoenix changed me. Moving to Phoenix was a slap in the face, and it woke me up, and it made me go, oh, you mean moving to a different city isn't necessarily a good thing? It's not going to necessarily change your life. That's what I discovered. 20 years ago, I began this journey of self-discovery, of becoming an artist, of changing my career, getting married, learning how to market my music and my art, becoming a photographer. And in a way, I was, you know, the caterpillar, and I became a butterfly. A bitter, what's the word? A bitter, not naive. I was naive. I like to think I'm not any longer, but I'm still a little naive. Negative, pessimistic butterfly, you know, flying around going, oh, fuck this shit, you know. I don't know. But I changed a lot back then. I must have some vitamin drink. So I woke up today thinking about this because it's been 20 years since I moved back to Cleveland. My wife and I were dating. We lived together. We lived in sin. And then after a variety of months of being together, she and I had this big talk. And she said, you know what, why don't we move back to Phoenix? You really want to go back there? I had to move back to Phoenix because I felt like there was something I hadn't accomplished yet out there, something I needed to do for myself. So my wife and I, we moved to Phoenix about a year later. And in 2023, fall of 2023, we moved to Phoenix, and we got married in the summer or late spring of 2004 in Vegas. And my wife and I bought a house, and we settled down out there. And, you know, Phoenix was a difficult place for me because the people were so difficult. But it was also a great place because I met my dog Eli. I rescued him from the Arizona Humane Society, and this is Eli here. This is Eli looking at a pile of poop in the rocks because Eli liked to eat other dogs' poop. And there he is scouting out a pile of poop, and he's going to try to eat it. And we had just adopted Eli here in this picture. And so some good things happened out there. I discovered photography in Arizona. I found my dog, Eli. I got our dog Zoe. I don't have a picture of Zoe here. I learned photography. I learned web design. I found out that the educational system out in Arizona is far superior to anything here in Ohio. I found that too much sunshine all the time drove me crazy. I despise the sun now. I found a new love and appreciation and a respect for the state of Ohio and the people of Ohio, and my love for the change of seasons, winter, spring, autumn, summertime. I started to yearn for Ohio. And after about 2 years in Phoenix, my wife and I had agreed to move back to Ohio. Once again, I was going to move back. But something unfortunate happened, and that was the housing market crashed, and we were unable to sell our house because it was worthless. You know, we owed more in the house than it was worth at the time. So we were stuck out there another 5 years. So in 2013, we started to get some equity in the house. The market recovered. We sold our house and we moved back to Ohio. But while I was out there, you know, here's a picture of me and Eli hiking on the mountains of Phoenix. This is at Usery Mountain, which is east of Phoenix. And, you know, I learned that it's okay to move to a new city. It's okay to spread your wings. But I learned that it isn't necessarily going to fix anything. It's not going to make anything go away. As a matter of fact, when I was out there, all the thoughts and the demons that I had in my head about my childhood, about my parents, and about, you know, friends that I'd had, seemed to get magnified in my head. And I began to think about them, not obsessively, but they seemed to haunt my thoughts quite a bit. And I ended up yearning to be back in Ohio. I yearned for snow. I yearned for rain. There's no rain in Arizona. There's only 3 inches of rain a year. In an entire year, they get 3 inches of rain. And I'd wake up in the morning out there thinking, maybe it rained last night. And I'd run to the window. Oh, no, more sunshine. I mean, sunshine every single day in Arizona is like having a room full of chocolate cake, and somebody lets you into this room, and you can just eat as much as you want, but there's no milk to wash it down. It's just, it's horrible. There's too much sunshine, and the people out there were just nasty, impolite, rude, inconsiderate, self-centered, just nasty fuckers. Nasty. They're as prickly as the landscape is out there. And I spent a lot of time doing self-reflection out there and doing a lot of things to improve myself. Here's a picture. Somebody took a bunch of rocks and painted them white and put them on a mountainside. So I guess when the planes are flying in from the east going west to Sky Harbor International Airport, they don't get lost. I guess the pilots have a problem out there with navigating. But I discovered that, you know, you can't run away from your past. And it doesn't matter where you go. If you've got deep-seated issues like I have, and they were worse back then when I was younger, if you move to a new city, it's not going to get better. You're going to have to confront the past eventually. And this brings me to today, November 23rd, 2022. You know, at the time I moved out there, I was 36. I'm 57 now. I'm a little bit grayer. I'm a little bit lighter. I've lost some weight. I'm a lot wiser. But things have changed. People have come and gone. People have died. And, you know, close friends of mine have died. People I've worked with have passed on. People have moved away. I've lost relationships that I once had that I don't have anymore. New ones have come into my life. And I woke up today thinking about it, going, you know, wow, so much has happened in these 20 years. And I realized I wasn't meant for the corporate world. I'm just not a corporate person. I don't understand it. I couldn't comprehend the idea of people being rude to you just because they call themselves a manager. I never understood that. I was always the type of employee that did better work and would want to work for you if you were give me a pat in the back or an attaboy or finding positive things to say about me. And I very, very rarely find managers like that. Most managers have egos like the size of Montana, and they think they're all that in a bag of chips. They think they have the right to belittle you and to tear you down. And it doesn't matter whether it's a call center or not. It's any industry, in any office, people with a title get really into being in control. And it's the most annoying thing in the world, and I just couldn't hack it. I didn't like it. So in Arizona, I went into business for myself as a photographer, and I was a musician, and I was gigging, and I was pulling in some extra cash. It's never amounted to a lot, but it was an extra anywhere from $2,000 to $5,000 a year. But at the same time, I had to spend just about as much in supplies and equipment and advertising just to make that money. So I was, never made a profit. If I did, it was only a few dollars. But these last 20 years, a lot has happened. My wife and I have evolved as a couple. We've evolved as people. She has seen her career in the corporate world take off, and she's been very successful. I have focused solely on my art and my photography and filmmaking. And that leads me to my new film. My new film is a documentary about my childhood, where I was raised by two alcoholic parents. And it's called Road to Forgiveness. And it's a film that I am very proud of. And I look forward to having all of you see it. It's hopefully going to be out within the next couple of months. It was supposed to be out. It was supposed to be out on the 18th, but I ran into some issues with the clip that's in it. That's from the Andy Griffith Show, and this clip is copyrighted, of course, and is part of the Andy Griffith Show, and it's something that CBS needs to approve, and they've had it on the back burner, and it's a scene I may have to cut out from the film because they're just dragging their feet about, and they're not about to do anything. So I don't know. I don't know what to do about it. And here's this is the poster for my film. This is Road to Forgiveness, a documentary by myself, Peter Tompkins. And addiction spares no one. And that's one of the biggest things I discovered in Phoenix was, in order to find a healthy path to recovery, if you were raised by alcoholic parents or by addicts, for me, I can't tell you what to do, but for me to find peace in myself about what went on during my childhood, I stumbled upon forgiveness. I didn't seek it, but I found it. And I have complete forgiveness towards both of my parents. And at the worst of times, we were poor, we were homeless. Both my parents were alcoholics, but my dad's addiction to alcohol was very similar to what it would be like to be addicted to heroin. Nothing would stand between him and his next drink. And in this journey over the last 20 years, I literally wrestled mentally and emotionally with my parents. They've both been gone my mom's been gone for 30 years, my dad's been gone for 35 years. So they were dead when I lived in Phoenix, but I wrestled with my thoughts of them, my memories of them, the bad things, the good things. And it occurred to me how human they were. It occurred to me how vulnerable they were and how they were both victims of the society in a way. My mom was raised to go out and find a man, find a husband. My dad was raised to drink and smoke cigarettes and be a man, and all these stupid societal, cultural things. And I definitely don't think my dad was meant to be a father. I don't think he was meant to be a husband. I'm not meant to be a father. I've never had any desire to have children, and my wife and I don't have children, and we're not going to have children. It's too late for us, but we're not going to adopt. I have no syrupy, sweet, saccharine sentiment about having children. But I think my father I think my dad was like a wounded animal. I mean, when you see a wounded animal, you don't hate it. You know, you don't go, oh, Jesus Christ, a fucking bloody animal on the side of the road barking at me because he's in pain. Ah. No, you go, oh, let's get him a vet. Let's put him in the trunk of the car, give him a blanket. Hope he doesn't bite us. You know, it's the way I looked at my dad when I had this epiphany and this thought about him. And I found forgiveness towards both of them. And I'm not going to, it's in my film. I discuss it in my film. So when this comes out, Road to Recovery, it should be out. It should be out in the next couple of weeks, but it's probably going to take longer because the big wigs at CBS are considering this one clip I've got in my film, but I may just remove it. So this is where I began my journey, a new life journey. This is where I began a lot of self-analysis, and I began my life as an artist, and I began to find out what it's really like to be an artist. And that's where I began my journey working in the corporate world and in call centers. I had worked in the corporate world prior to this, but I wasn't in the big call centers. Like the big call centers are meat grinders. They're just hell on earth. Awful places. And I invite you to see this film. I invite you to look at it with open mind and open heart. And maybe it'll help you down a journey in a different road, or take you in a different place, or give you a different perspective of your own life or of your parents. Maybe you had good parents. Maybe it'll make you feel good that you had such great parents. I had a great mom. My mom was great. My mom is the only person in this world who, ever, other than my wife, she's the only person to ever stay true to me and be true to her word, keep her word about things, and be kind to me and not have any malicious intent. There was absence of malice with her. She made some mistakes, and she made up for her mistakes, and she sacrificed her life for those mistakes in her life. And I love her deeply. And I love my dad, too. I do. Because he's part of me, I'm part of him. So watch Road to Forgiveness. And if you need to start a journey of your own, I encourage you to do that. Start doing some self-analysis about your life, especially if you grew up in a family of addicts, where your life was filled with pain and uncertainty and torture. So this is PTPOP. I'm signing off. You all have a good day. Thanks. Bye.